breaking point. The air inside the Grand Galactic Assembly felt heavier than usual. Ambassador Sarah Mitchell stood at the entrance of the massive chamber, her hands steady at her sides despite the storm brewing in her chest. The hall stretched before her like a cathedral of alien architecture, with crystalline pillars reaching toward a ceiling that displayed a perfect simulation of the cosmos. 700 delegates from across known space occupied their designated stations, their varied forms creating a tapestry of galactic diversity. Sarah had walked this path countless times over the past 15 years. She knew every curve of the obsidian floor, every reflection in the translucent walls, but today felt different. Today, the weight of an entire species rested on her shoulders. The session had been called with unusual urgency. The message had reached Earth's embassy just 18 hours ago, marked with the red seal of an emergency tribunal decision. Sarah had read the verdict 3 times, each reading making her blood run colder. Then she had made a series of calls that would change everything. Now she walked forward, her simple gray suit standing in stark contrast to the elaborate robes and biological displays of the other delegates. Humans had learned early that modest presentation often worked in their favor among species who viewed ostentation as a sign of insecurity. But today, Sarah wasn't thinking about diplomatic strategy. Today, she was thinking about the 3,000 colonists on Epsilon Reach, the mining outpost that Earth had established 12 years ago on a barren moon in the outer reaches. The presiding arbiter, a towering being called Nexor, whose species had mediated galactic disputes for millennia, raised one of its 4 crystalline arms. The chamber fell silent with practiced efficiency. Ambassador Mitchell of the Terran delegation, Nexor's voice resonated through translation devices embedded throughout the hall. You have been summoned to hear the final decision of the Territorial Tribunal regarding dispute case 7749. Sarah stopped at the human delegation's modest platform near the rear of the chamber. She didn't sit. Protocol demanded she remain standing until given permission otherwise. The presiding arbiter continued without pause. The tribunal has reviewed all evidence presented by both the Terran Republic and the Dracorian Empire. After thorough deliberation, the council has reached a unanimous decision. Nexor's multifaceted eyes seemed to fix on Sarah, though reading emotion in such an alien face was impossible. The territorial claim filed by the Dracorian Empire has been validated. The moon designated by humans as Epsilon Reach falls within boundaries established by ancient Dracorian survey rights, dating back 4,000 standard years. The Terran colony is hereby declared in violation of established territorial law. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Sarah felt the eyes of 700 beings turn toward her, some with curiosity, some with pity, many with indifference. The Dracorian delegation, positioned in one of the prestigious front stations reserved for elder civilizations, radiated satisfaction. Their leader, High Commander Varkesh, stood nearly 3 meters tall, his scaled form gleaming under the chamber's ambient light. The Terran Republic has 72 standard hours to begin evacuation procedures, Nexor continued. All human presence must be removed from the disputed territory within 30 standard days. Failure to comply will result in forcible removal and significant penalties against Earth's standing in this council. Sarah's jaw tightened. 30 days, 3,000 people. Equipment worth decades of Earth's economic output. Dreams and lives built over 12 years of backbreaking work in one of the harshest environments humanity had ever attempted to colonize. All to be abandoned because of a survey map drawn 4,000 years ago by a civilization that had never bothered to actually visit the moon until humans made it valuable. The mathematics of it was brutally simple. 3,000 colonists couldn't be evacuated in 30 days. Not with Earth's limited transport capacity in that region of space. The mining equipment was too valuable to abandon, but too massive to move quickly. The living habitats, the hydroponic gardens, the schools where children learned and played, all of it would have to be left behind or destroyed. Ambassador Mitchell, Nexor said, and there was something almost gentle in the translated tone. Does the Terran Republic acknowledge this ruling? This was the moment. The proper response was scripted by 30 years of careful diplomacy. Sarah had given that response dozens of times before. Accept the ruling. File an appeal through proper channels. Work within the system. Show the galaxy that humanity could be reasonable, civilized, and patient. She thought of the last transmission she had received from Epsilon Reach. Commander James Park. The colony administrator had sent a video message. His daughter Emily had appeared in the frame, 8 years old with her father's dark eyes and her mother's bright smile. Emily had been born on Epsilon Reach. She had never seen Earth. The harsh moon was the only home she had ever known. Ambassador? Nexor prompted. Sarah took a breath. 30 years. 3 decades of swallowing insults and accepting compromises. 30 years of playing by rules designed by civilizations that had mastered space travel, while humans were still learning to make fire. 30 years of being told that patience and compliance would eventually earn humanity respect. She stepped forward, moving past the boundary of the human platform. A ripple of surprise moved through the assembly. Delegates didn't leave their assigned positions without explicit permission during formal sessions. Ambassador Mitchell, you are out of order, Nexor warned. Sarah kept walking. Security drones hummed to life around the chamber's perimeter, their sensor arrays tracking her movement. She stopped 10 meters from the central podium where Nexor presided, directly in the sightline of the entire assembly. No, Sarah said. Her voice was quiet, but the chamber's acoustics carried it to every corner. The single word created absolute silence. Even the usual background susurrus of translators and whispered conversations ceased completely. I beg your pardon? Nexor's tone carried genuine confusion. No, Sarah repeated, louder this time. The Terran Republic does not acknowledge this ruling. We will not evacuate Epsilon Reach. We will not abandon 3,000 human beings who have committed no crime except believing in the promises of this council. The explosion of reaction was immediate. Delegates rose from their positions, voices raised in multiple languages, creating a cacophony of protest and shock. The Dracorian delegation erupted in outrage, Varkesh's bellowing roar cutting through the noise. Silence! Nexor's command was amplified to painful levels, forcing order. Ambassador Mitchell, you realize what you are saying? You are refusing a legitimate tribunal decision. This is unprecedented. This is theft, Sarah interrupted, and the audacity of cutting off the presiding arbiter created another wave of shock. This is theft dressed in legal language. The Dracorian Empire filed no objection when we announced our colonization plans 14 years ago. They said nothing during 12 years of construction and settlement. They only discovered their ancient survey rights after we did all the hard work of making that moon habitable, after we invested everything we had, after we built a community there. Varkesh rose to his full imposing height. How dare you question the legitimacy of Dracorian historical claims? Our survey rights are documented and verified. Your ignorance of galactic law does not invalidate 4,000 years of established territory. Sarah turned to face him directly. Your survey rights are a convenient fiction. You sent one automated probe to that moon 4,000 years ago. It took readings for 6 hours and left. You never returned. You never established any presence. You never developed the territory. Under Earth's legal traditions, abandoned claims have no standing. You can't ignore something for 4 millennia and then suddenly claim ownership when someone else makes it valuable. Earth's legal traditions are irrelevant, Varkesh shot back. You are in galactic space, subject to galactic law. And galactic law is clear. Historical survey rights supersede later settlement. Only when convenient for the powerful, Sarah said. Her voice had grown colder, harder. I've spent 15 years in this council. I've watched how your laws work. When the Chrythonian Confederation violated the Sentience Protection Protocols, experimenting on pre-spaceflight species, this council gave them a formal warning and a fine that amounted to nothing. When the Andrelian Collective seized mineral-rich asteroids claimed by the Bavarian League, you mediated a compromise. But when the Bavarian League tried to do the same thing to Andrelian interests 3 years later, suddenly the law was absolute and unbreakable. She turned slowly, addressing the entire chamber. When the Vortan Empire blockaded human trade routes 6 years ago because they didn't like our export prices, we filed a complaint. We followed every proper channel. We provided evidence. We proved clear violations of free trade agreements, and this council told us to negotiate directly with the Vortans to find a compromise, to be patient. The Vortan delegate, a being of luminous energy contained in a crystalline form, pulsed with what might have been embarrassment or anger. But when a human merchant ship accidentally crossed into Chrythonian space due to a navigation error, an honest mistake with no malicious intent, you impounded the vessel and imprisoned the crew for 14 months. No mediation, no compromise. Just immediate punishment. Sarah's words fell like hammer blows. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably. Others whispered among themselves. I have one set of laws for ancient civilizations and another for newcomers, she continued. You preach about unity and cooperation and the rule of law, but what you really mean is that the powerful can do as they please, while species like mine must be grateful for whatever scraps we're allowed. This is outrageous. The Celestian ambassador, an ethereal being whose species was among the Council's founders, rose from their station. We have welcomed humanity into galactic civilization. We have shared technology, opened trade, offered educational exchanges, and this is how you respond to our generosity? With accusations and defiance? Sarah's laugh was bitter. Generosity? You've sold us outdated technology at premium prices. You've opened trade on terms that favor your established corporations. And every educational exchange comes with unspoken conditions. Our students learn your languages, your customs, your ways. But how many of your species have bothered to learn about Earth? How many of you know anything about human history or culture, beyond the basic briefings your diplomats prepare? She paused, letting the question hang. The silence was damning. We've spent 30 years proving ourselves worthy of your respect, Sarah said quietly. 30 years of following your rules, accepting your decisions, being patient and reasonable. And what has it earned us? The moment we build something of value, the moment we show we can thrive in this galaxy, you find ways to take it from us. You speak of respect, Nexor said, and there was something almost sad in the translated tone. But respect must be earned through cooperation, not defiance. If you refuse this ruling, you risk everything your species has built. The Dracorian Empire has the legal right to enforce their claim. They have the military capacity to do so. You are asking for war over a single colony. I'm asking for dignity, Sarah said. I'm asking for the same consideration you give to each other. I'm asking for the rules to apply equally to everyone, not just to the convenient targets. She reached into her jacket and pulled out a small data crystal, placing it on a nearby surface. This contains full documentation of Earth's defensive capabilities. Not the watered-down reports we've been filing with the Council. The real specifications. The weapon systems we developed during our conflicts in our own solar system. The tactical doctrines we've refined. The training protocols that have made our forces among the most effective per capita in known space. The chamber went absolutely still. Even the background hum of technology seemed to quiet. We've kept this classified, Sarah continued, because we learned that in this galaxy, showing weakness gets you exploited, but showing strength gets you respected. We've been studying your technologies for 30 years, learning, adapting, improving. Did you know that human engineers have increased standard shield efficiency by 23%? Did you know we've developed missile guidance systems that can operate effectively in high-interference environments where standard galactic systems fail? She looked directly at Varkesh. The Dracorian Empire commands an impressive fleet. We don't dispute that. But we've also studied every recorded engagement the Dracorians have fought in the past century. We know your tactics, we know your strengths and your weaknesses, and we've prepared specifically for the possibility that someone would eventually try to take from us by force. You're bluffing, Varkesh said, but uncertainty crept into his translated voice. Am I? Sarah's smile was cold. There's an easy way to find out. Send your fleet to Epsilon Reach. Try to remove our colonists by force. See what happens when you push humanity to the point where we have nothing left to lose. The threat hung in the air like a drawn blade. The mathematics of galactic politics suddenly shifted. The Dracorian Empire was powerful, ancient, and proud. But pride meant they couldn't back down from a challenge without losing face. And humanity, according to Sarah's words, was prepared to fight a war they couldn't possibly win, unless they could win. Unless 30 years of human ingenuity and desperation had produced something unexpected. This is madness, the Celestian ambassador said. You would risk your entire species over one colony? Think of Earth, Ambassador Mitchell. Think of your homeworld and the billions who live there. Would you sacrifice them for 3,000 colonists? I'm thinking of my grandson, Sarah said quietly. David Mitchell. He's 6 years old. He lives on Epsilon Reach with his parents. He's learning to read. He likes to collect rocks from the moon's surface and categorize them by mineral composition. His favorite color is blue, which he's only ever seen in pictures because Epsilon Reach's sky is always rust-colored from the atmospheric conditions. Her voice remained steady, but something in her eyes burned with an intensity that transcended species barriers. I'm thinking about whether I want David to grow up in a galaxy where might makes right, where the powerful prey on the weak, where justice is a privilege of the ancient and established, or whether I want him to grow up knowing that his grandmother stood up and said enough, that humanity refused to be victims anymore. She turned back to Nexor. You want to know if we'll really fight? Ask yourselves this. What kind of species travels to the stars knowing they're the weakest, the newest, the most vulnerable? What kind of species keeps pushing forward despite every setback, every insult, every obstacle? What kind of species looks at impossible odds and says, we'll find a way? Sarah's voice dropped to barely above a whisper, but somehow it filled the entire chamber. We're humans. We don't give up. We don't back down. And we sure as hell don't abandon our own. The silence that followed was profound. 700 delegates from across the galaxy stared at a single human woman who had just declared that her species would rather face annihilation than accept injustice. In that moment, something shifted. The political calculus changed. Because everyone in that chamber suddenly realized they didn't actually know what humans were capable of. They had dismissed Earth as a minor power, a curiosity, a species to be managed and guided. But standing before them was someone who had stopped asking for permission to exist. Presiding Arbiter Nexor remained motionless for long seconds. Then slowly, deliberately, they gestured toward the Dracorian delegation. High Commander Varkesh, perhaps this matter requires additional deliberation. The tribunal's decision stands, but the timeline for implementation might benefit from reconsideration. It wasn't a victory. It wasn't even a concession. But it was a crack in the absolute certainty that had condemned Epsilon Reach just minutes before. Varkesh's scaled face twisted with conflicting emotions. Accept the hint of compromise and appear weak, or push forward and potentially face a conflict with unknown parameters? Sarah stood perfectly still, waiting. The next 72 hours would determine whether humanity's desperate gamble would lead to war or something else entirely. The price of dignity. Countdown began the moment Sarah Mitchell left the Grand Galactic Assembly. 72 hours. 3 standard days for the Dracorian Empire to decide whether humanity's defiance was bluff or genuine threat. 3 days for Earth to prepare for consequences that could reshape everything. Sarah didn't return to Earth's modest embassy station. Instead, she went directly to the secure communications suite, buried 3 levels below the diplomatic quarter. The room was small, shielded by layers of signal-dampening technology that humanity had quietly developed over decades. When she activated the quantum-encrypted channel, the holographic display flickered to life, showing 5 faces. The Joint Chiefs of Earth's Defense Council. It's done, Sarah said without preamble. They're considering options. But Varkesh won't back down without something to save face. He can't. The Dracorian culture views any retreat as personal dishonor. Admiral Chen Rodriguez, Earth's Chief of Naval Operations, leaned forward. His weathered face carried the weight of 40 years of military service. The Third Fleet is in position. Commander Park has finished final preparations at Epsilon Reach. But Sarah, we need to be clear about something. If this goes hot, we can hold them off. But we can't win a prolonged engagement. The numbers don't lie. The numbers never tell the whole story, Sarah replied. How long can we hold? Depends on their commitment level, said General Amara Okonkwo, head of ground forces. If they send a standard enforcement fleet expecting minimal resistance, we can make them hurt badly enough that they'll reconsider. If they send their full battle group treating us as a peer threat. She paused. 72 hours of combat operations before our ammunition and power reserves run critical. 72 hours, Sarah repeated. The irony wasn't lost on her. The same deadline they gave us to start evacuating. Dr. James Yoshida, Director of Advanced Research, cleared his throat. His presence on this call represented Earth's hidden ace. Ambassador, the Council delegates don't know about Project Threshold. Even now, most of them think human technology is 2 generations behind standard galactic baseline. They have no idea what we've actually accomplished. Sarah nodded slowly. Project Threshold. 15 years of classified research, consuming resources that Earth could barely afford. All based on a simple observation. Every spacefaring civilization in the galaxy used essentially the same technologies, refined over millennia into proven, reliable systems. But proven and reliable also meant predictable, and predictable could be countered. What's the deployment status? she asked. All 73 threshold platforms are operational, Yoshida reported. We've seeded them throughout the Epsilon Reach sector over the past 3 years, disguised as standard communications relays and survey satellites. The Dracorians have no idea they're flying into the most sophisticated defensive grid humanity has ever built. And the dampening field? Ready to deploy on your authorization. Once activated, standard FTL communications and sensors will be reduced to approximately 30% effectiveness throughout the entire sector. Their fleet coordination will degrade significantly. Their targeting systems will struggle. It'll be like fighting in a fog for them. Sarah felt a chill despite the room's climate control. Project Threshold represented humanity's darkest calculation. If you couldn't match your enemy's strength, you changed the nature of the battlefield itself. Make the fight so unpredictable, so chaotic, that superior numbers became less decisive. There's something else, Admiral Rodriguez said grimly. We've intercepted encrypted Dracorian communications. Varkesh isn't just bringing an enforcement fleet. He's bringing the Crimson Legion, his personal battle group, 300 ships including the dreadnought Dominus Eternal. The weight of that statement settled over the virtual meeting. The Crimson Legion was legendary, the Dracorian Empire's most elite formation. They didn't deploy for police actions. They deployed to make statements. He's coming to crush us completely, General Okonkwo said. To make an example, show the galaxy what happens when newcomers challenge ancient powers. Then we'll teach the galaxy something else, Sarah said quietly. We'll show them what happens when you push humans too far. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of desperate preparation. On Epsilon Reach, Commander James Park implemented Protocol Omega, the evacuation and defense plan that every human colony maintained, but prayed they'd never need. Non-essential personnel and all children under 12 were loaded onto transport ships bound for Earth. Emily Park, age 8, cried as she hugged her father goodbye, not understanding why she had to leave their home. I'll see you soon, sweetheart, James promised, his heart breaking. He didn't know if it was a lie. The remaining colonists, nearly 2,000 adults and older children, transformed the mining colony into a fortress. Every tunnel system, every habitat module, every equipment yard became a defensive position. Human ingenuity, born from centuries of warfare on Earth, produced solutions the galaxy had never considered. Improvised weapons made from mining equipment, traps constructed from industrial machinery, fighting positions designed not for elegant tactical doctrine, but for bloody, desperate survival. Above the moon, the Third Fleet took position. 47 ships. It was everything Earth could spare without leaving the homeworld defenseless. Compared to the Crimson Legion's 300 vessels, it looked pitifully inadequate. But Admiral Rodriguez had spent his entire career studying asymmetric warfare, the ancient human art of winning fights you shouldn't be able to win. Sarah remained at the Galactic Council station, attending diplomatic functions with perfect composure while the clock counted down. Other ambassadors approached her with varying mixtures of curiosity, concern, and condemnation. The Zephyrian delegate, one of humanity's few consistent supporters, pulled her aside at a reception. Ambassador Mitchell, please reconsider, the ethereal being pleaded. The council might still negotiate a compromise, perhaps a compensation package for the colonists, assistance with relocation costs. Pride isn't worth extinction. This isn't about pride, Sarah replied gently. It's about whether humanity has any future in this galaxy. If we back down now, the message is clear. Humans can be pushed around indefinitely. Every time we build something, someone will find a legal pretext to take it. Every time we succeed, we'll be cut back down. This ends here one way or another. The 72 hours expired at 0800 Standard Galactic Time. The Crimson Legion arrived at Epsilon Reach at 0803. 300 warships materialized from FTL. Transit in perfect formation, a display of military precision refined over millennia. The dreadnought Dominus Eternal alone massed more than Earth's entire Third Fleet combined. Its hull gleamed with the deep crimson that gave the Legion its name, and its weapon ports could level a planet's surface in hours. High Commander Varkesh broadcast on all channels, his translated voice carrying absolute certainty. Terran forces, this is High Commander Varkesh of the Dracorian Crimson Legion. You are in violation of Galactic Council directives and Dracorian territorial law. You have one final opportunity to surrender. Power down your vessels. Evacuate all personnel from the surface and submit to Council authority. Refuse and you will be removed by force. You have 10 minutes to comply. On the bridge of the destroyer EDS Defiant, Admiral Rodriguez watched the tactical display light up with enemy contacts. 300 red icons surrounding 47 green ones. The mathematics of annihilation. All ships, he said calmly. Battle stations. Activate protocol threshold on my mark. 10 minutes passed in silence. The Dracorian fleet waited with the patience of absolute power. When no response came, Varkesh gave the order. All vessels advance. Disable their fleet and prepare landing forces. The Crimson Legion began its approach, a tide of overwhelming force rolling forward to sweep aside the insignificant human resistance. That's when Dr. Yoshida, watching from Earth's command center, entered the authorization code. Project Threshold activated. 73 hidden platforms, scattered throughout the Epsilon Reach sector, powered up simultaneously. They didn't fire weapons. They didn't launch missiles. Instead, they emitted precisely calibrated quantum field disruptions, overlapping and interfering with standard galactic sensor and communication technologies. The effect was immediate and catastrophic for the Dracorian formation. Fleet coordination, which relied on FTL communication links, degraded to stuttering fragments. Targeting systems calibrated for the standard electromagnetic spectrum suddenly struggled to achieve lock. The perfect formation began to dissolve into uncertainty and confusion. "What is this?" Varkesh demanded, staring at his command display as it flickered and distorted. "What have they done?" He got his answer moments later when the Third Fleet attacked. Human vessels, their systems designed specifically to operate in the degraded environment, struck with precision that should have been impossible. Missile swarms, each projectile independently guided and communicating via quantum entanglement rather than standard FTL, bypassed confused Dracorian point defense systems. Kinetic impactors, moving at relativistic speeds and requiring no active guidance, punched through shields that couldn't properly orient without reliable sensor data. The first salvo disabled 14 Dracorian ships before their commanders even understood what was happening. "Return fire," Varkesh roared. "All vessels independent targeting. Destroy them!" The Crimson Legion responded with the overwhelming firepower that had crushed 100 rebellions. Energy weapons that could vaporize capital ships. Missiles that could track targets across light seconds. The problem was that their sophisticated targeting systems kept losing track of the human vessels. Admiral Rodriguez had anticipated this. Human ships didn't fight like galactic naval doctrine dictated. They didn't maintain formation and exchange broadsides. They fought like submarines in old Earth's oceans, appearing, striking, disappearing, using the sensor disruption like darkness to hide in, coordinating through quantum-entangled communication that the threshold field didn't affect. The battle became chaos, exactly as humanity had planned. The Dracorian numerical advantage meant less when they couldn't coordinate effectively. Their superior firepower mattered less when they couldn't reliably target enemies. Individual human ships were still outmatched, but the nature of the engagement had changed from inevitable slaughter to brutal, grinding attrition on Epsilon Reach's surface. Dracorian landing craft began their descent despite the confusion in orbit. The ground assault would proceed even if the naval battle was proving unexpectedly difficult. 10,000 Dracorian warriors, veterans of countless campaigns, against 2,000 human colonists with improvised weapons. Commander James Park watched the landing craft approach through thermal imaging. Standard sensors were useless in the threshold field's interference. He keyed his communication system, using the old-fashioned radio frequencies that worked just fine. "All positions, remember your training. We don't have to win. We just have to make victory cost more than they're willing to pay." The first wave of Dracorian warriors landed expecting scattered resistance. What they found was a killing ground. The humans had spent 12 years mining Epsilon Reach, digging tunnels throughout the moon's interior. They knew every passage, every chamber, every dead end. They had transformed their home into a three-dimensional maze where the Dracorian sophisticated armor and weapons became liabilities in tight, twisting passages. Mining charges became improvised explosives. Industrial lasers became defensive weapons. Cargo haulers became improvised fighting vehicles. The colonists fought with the desperate ingenuity of people defending their homes, using every advantage of terrain and familiarity. Dracorian warriors, trained for open combat and set-piece battles, found themselves in a nightmare of close-quarters ambushes and collapsing tunnels. Every advance cost lives. Every cleared sector was mined and booby-trapped. The humans weren't fighting to win. They were fighting to bleed their enemies until victory became too expensive. Hours passed. The battle in orbit continued, human ships darting through the sensor interference while Dracorian vessels tried to corner and destroy them. Casualties mounted on both sides, but the ratio wasn't the 10-to-1 slaughter that Varkesh had expected. It was closer to 3-to-1, and that mathematics changed everything. On the surface, Dracorian commanders reported staggering losses for minimal territorial gains. The humans were yielding ground grudgingly, making every meter cost blood and time. In the Grand Galactic Assembly, emergency sessions had been ongoing since the battle began. Real-time reports filtered in, each one more shocking than the last. Humanity, the newcomers everyone had dismissed, was fighting the Crimson Legion to a standstill. Not winning but not collapsing either, just bleeding the ancient empire with every passing hour. "This is madness," the Celestian ambassador declared. "Both sides are being destroyed for what? Pride? A single moon?" Sarah Mitchell, still attending the sessions despite the desperate battle her people were fighting, stood to respond. Her face was drawn with exhaustion and stress, but her voice remained steady. "For dignity," she corrected, "for the principle that in this galaxy, the law should apply equally to everyone. That newcomers shouldn't have to beg for permission to exist. That ancient civilizations can't just take whatever they want because they're old and powerful." She looked around the chamber. Every species here remembers what it was like to be young and vulnerable. Every civilization here once had to prove they deserved to exist among the stars. We're just asking for the same consideration you all received. The same chance to build a future without constantly looking over our shoulders, waiting for someone to find a legal excuse to take it away. Presiding Arbiter Nexor spoke slowly. "The question before this council is no longer about Epsilon Reach. It's about whether we allow conflicts like this to continue. High Commander Varkesh, your Legion has been engaged for 14 hours. What are your casualty figures?" Varkesh's response came via communication link, his translated voice carrying barely suppressed rage. 37 vessels damaged or destroyed. 4,000 warriors killed or wounded on the surface. But we are winning. Give us another 20 hours and you'll have destroyed a human fleet that cost Earth decades to build, killed thousands of colonists defending their homes, and lost what? 50 ships? 8,000 warriors? For one moon? Nexor's tone was unreadable. "What will you have won, High Commander?" The question hung in space between stars. What indeed would the Dracorian Empire have won? The moon would be theirs, technically. But at what cost? The Crimson Legion's reputation for invincibility would be shattered. The galaxy would know that humans, weak humans, had made them bleed for every meter, and more importantly, it would set a precedent that if you pushed humanity hard enough, they would make victory cost more than it was worth. "The Terran Republic has sent an offer," Nexor announced. Ambassador Mitchell transmitted it 10 minutes ago. Perhaps both parties should consider it. Sarah's proposal was simple. Epsilon Reach would become jointly administered territory. The Dracorian survey rights would be acknowledged, but human development rights would also be recognized. Profits from the moon's mining operations would be split 70-30 in favor of the Dracorians, acknowledging their historical claim while preserving humanity's investment. Both sides would withdraw military forces and submit to neutral council arbitrators for final boundary determinations. It wasn't fair. Humanity had built everything on that moon, but it was survival. It was compromise. It was both sides being able to walk away and claim partial victory. Varkesh wanted to refuse. Every instinct of Dracorian pride demanded he push forward until the humans were completely crushed. But the casualty reports kept coming. His Legion was winning, but barely. And the longer the fight continued, the more the galaxy watched and wondered if the mighty Dracorian Empire was really so mighty after all. After 8 more hours of brutal combat, after 63 Dracorian ships had been disabled or destroyed, after 7,000 warriors had fallen on Epsilon Reach's blood-soaked surface, Varkesh gave the order to accept the proposal. The ceasefire took effect at hour 22 of the battle. Both fleets withdrew to neutral positions. Medical ships moved in to recover the wounded and dead, and across the galaxy, every civilization that had watched the confrontation unfold processed what they had witnessed. Humanity hadn't won. Earth's third fleet was shattered. Barely 20 ships still combat-capable. Epsilon Reach's surface installations were devastated, years of work destroyed. Over 500 human colonists and military personnel had died defending their home. But humanity hadn't lost either. They had forced one of the galaxy's most powerful empires to compromise. They had proven that pushing humans too far came with a price. They had shown that human defiance wasn't empty bluster but backed by genuine capability and terrifying determination. Sarah Mitchell returned to Earth 3 weeks later. She had aged visibly during the crisis, the weight of 500 deaths carved into the lines around her eyes. But when she stepped off the shuttle at Geneva Spaceport, thousands were waiting, not to celebrate a victory, but to acknowledge what those deaths had purchased: dignity, respect. The beginning of a galaxy that saw humans not as supplicants, but as equals who would fight for what was theirs. The Grand Galactic Assembly. Subtle changes began to occur. Tribunal decisions affecting human interests received more careful scrutiny. Ancient survey rights suddenly required stronger justification before being accepted. Other young civilizations, watching what humanity had done, began to speak more firmly about their own concerns. The galaxy hadn't changed overnight. Ancient prejudices and power structures remained. But a crack had formed in the assumption that newcomers would always bend to the will of established powers. Sarah Mitchell's grandson David returned to Epsilon Reach 6 months later, after temporary housing was established in the sections of the colony that had survived the battle. He stood at the memorial wall where 500 names were carved in stone, including several of his friends' parents. "Grandmother," he asked during a video call, "was it worth it?" Sarah looked at her grandson's face, so young but carrying new shadows that war left even on children who only witnessed its aftermath. She thought about the dead. She thought about the compromises they had made. She thought about the principle they had fought for. "Yes," she said finally, "because now when you grow up you'll do it in a galaxy that knows humans don't give up, that we stand for something, that we protect our own. That's worth fighting for, David. That's worth everything." The transmission ended, leaving Sarah alone with her thoughts. Outside her window, Earth turned slowly against the stars, a small blue world among countless others. But a world whose people had proven they belonged among those stars, that they would carve out their place not through permission, but through determination. The peace had been shattered, but from the pieces humanity had built something stronger. Not victory, but dignity. Not dominance, but respect. And the understanding now shared across the galaxy that pushing humans came with a price that few were willing to pay. The truce was broken. But humanity had responded, and the galaxy would never quite see them the same way again.